We look around, but we do not see. We hear all these sounds, but fail to listen. We talk the talk so eloquently, but when the time comes to walk the walk, we just turn a blind eye. We have become an audience like those who sit around soccer fields with nice comfy seats and plenty of food and drinks to last for the game. We have become an audience who just sits on the sidelines. We're the audience to the cries of those who cry for justice, wondering if justice was ever just, because now it's just them and their Lord.
Salaam Alaykum and peace be upon you, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of The Rogue Muslim. And what voice was that, you may ask? That was a butchered version, an attempt at Effie Trinket from the Hunger Games, but I'm pretty sure I failed at that one. So let's just, again, ignore that and move on, shall we? I hope everyone's week has been really well. I hope things are going well and that life is treating you well. And for every time I say well, why don't you take a shot of chai or tea or chai tea? God. Anyways, to continue, actually, I wanted to start off by saying thank you, like a huge, massive thank you for the overwhelming support that I've received over the past week. It's been incredible, just the amount of people that have shared the podcast with their friends and family, who've reached out and given me words of encouragement, support, feedback. It really has been incredible and seriously most appreciated. Actually, there was one moment where people have been reaching out, and so I've been messaging like, thank you for your support, because I genuinely mean it, and I genuinely do thank you for your support. There was a moment where I was like, I sound like a sleazy ass politician. It was like, thank you for the support, and thank you for the support, and you over there, thank you for the support. And it genuinely, I don't mean it that way, obviously. Not having an identity crisis. I don't think I'm a sleazy ass politician. So in the most non-sleazy way, thank you for your support. It has meant a lot, and it's definitely inspired me to keep going and hopefully bring around good but predictably awkward content for you. I'd mentioned in the previous episode about Hajj, and just about how a lot of people feel that there is a united ummah when they go to Hajj. And I actually just wanted to bring to your attention a podcast called The Pilgrimage by Siraj Datoo. I think it's an excellent podcast, and it's essentially going through the journey of taking the pilgrimage and what it's like to prepare for it, what it's going to be like during Hajj, and then afterwards. So I urge you all to check it out. And also, speaking of podcasts, there is a great one called the Shaykh It Show. They're hilarious. There are these two British Welshmen who just talk about, general things happening in the Muslim community or the world, in society and culture. And I think it's brilliant. So if you'd like to check it out, that would also be amazing. What else do I have to share with you? Oh, yeah, okay, this is random, but I was at an event the other day, and it's an irritant one, okay? That's what this story is. So I was at an event, and I had a lady come up to me, a brown woman, and I know her and everything. It wasn't just a stranger or anything, but she's talking to me, and we talk about, like, skincare and everything, but there are always moments where she brings up something where she'll be like, "Oh, Samia, you'll never guess what I tried. It was this papaya yogurt lemon something scrub, and it's really brightened my skin. Like, I'm telling you, it's going to be noticeably lighter. So you should try it out. Your skin's going to get lighter." And oh God, to maintain poker faces in this situation is so hard, because obviously I don't want to disrespect her, but it's really irritating. I mean, I've had this, people press skin lightening products on me before, and I'm probably gonna have it again. But this idea of wanting to access whiteness, it's definitely intergenerational, but it just never ceases to piss me off. Like, I am perfectly fine with the color that I have. And if you are so offended by it, take it up with God on the day of judgment, because I am not here for it, okay? Like, if that's the kind of conversations you want to have with me, let's just say our khudafizes, do our widas, say goodbye, because I can't be asked with it. I am perfectly happy with the skin I have. I don't wish to lighten it, and I'm not trying to access whiteness in that way. And it is something that is definitely embedded within the South Asian community and culture. So definitely important to have conversations with it. But it was just something that I was like, really? Again, I have to hear this thing again. I mean, let me know if you've had, things like this happen to you. What are they called? Like skin lightening fair creams pushed at you and stuff. PSA here, everyone is beautiful. Whatever color your skin is, you are all magical, beautiful creatures who have so much worth and value that is not just defined by your skin color, okay? So let's just leave that conversation at that. So that was just something I had, and I wanted to put it out there. But back to this podcast. This is gonna be a long one, so strap in, go on a road trip and put on The Pilgrimage, The Shaykh It Show, and my podcast as your playlist. Or you could just take a really long walk or listen to this while you're cleaning. Anyways, my point is that it's a bit of a longer one, but a really interesting one, I think. So you will also definitely see my awkwardness in this interview. It is my first awkwardness. Actually, the way I introduce Yusuf is not really even that much of an introduction. It's just like, Yusuf Zine, welcome to the Rogue Muslim. I think in the back of my head, I was trying to emulate Michael Barbaro from The Daily, which is another podcast that's really good, but it was a fail. But it's with an activist called Yusuf Zine, and he is amazing. He's great. He's terrific. He's doing tremendous work. And could I sound any more like Donald Trump? Probably not. Maybe just with the accent, but he is genuinely just a really cool and great guy who's doing really rad things. He is the director of the play I Am Rohingya, and he is an actor as well. So we just go through his journey as being an actor, how that came to be, what that looks like, how it melded with his activism side, and then he takes us through an understanding of how the play I Am Rohingya came about. And I'm going to let him talk about the play and give you an introduction to the play, but I will say it is fan-bloody-tastic. It's incredible, it's emotive, it generates so much empathy, and it really opens and sheds a light to the lived experiences of the Rohingya youth and how they have experienced the genocide. And currently it's a play that is within Canada, but they are doing a documentary based on the play, and Yusuf talks about that as well. So I will leave links below in the podcast, in the show notes, on how we can support the play. And I think that I will sorry, stupid food fly just came into where I was recording. I mean, I'm recording under a blanket. I don't even know how it enters, but then again, food flies are irritants that appear out of nowhere, and you know what? That is something I will take up with God on the day of judgment. Why did he create the food fly? I can't even speak. It's just not cool, man. I don't understand them. But anyways, I digress. Surprise, surprise. Here we go. Here is the interview with actor, activist, and director of the play I Am Rohingya, Yusuf Zine. Enjoy. Yusuf Zine. Salaam Alaykum.
Walaikum assalam.
Welcome to The Rogue Muslim. We're happy to have you here.
I'm honored to be the first guest.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I kind of sprung it on Yusuf, about 5 minutes ago that he was the first guest of mine. So
now I'm sweating.
Yeah, but I have
All
faith.
of my confidence is out the window.
We'll build it back. We'll build it back slowly.
We'll build it together. Yeah. No, but thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
No, I'm honored. I'm honored too. Yusuf and I have known each other for.
I mean, I think probably like 5 years.
Yeah, I don't know. We did our undergrad and our masters together.
Yeah.
So we've been through the gutter together. Yeah, we go way.
Been through a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Yusuf is an actor and an activist and somebody that I've definitely seen grow in that. And I've been able to see some of the things he's done, and he has an impressive resume of work and just an impressive skill. But why don't I stop talking? And Yusuf, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Tell you about how great I am.
Yeah, just let me bask in your amazingness, please.
Well, thank you for that intro. That's very sweet. I've been doing acting and sort of been in entertainments as long as I can remember. Since I was a kid, I've always had a passion for acting, and that sort of sustained itself to this day. But right now, I'm sort of delving into filmmaking as well. But last year, I formed a media production company called Interspeak with some friends of mine who are all sort of also interested in filmmaking and creating art in different forms. So we formed Interspeak as a way to produce content, whether it's for the digital media space, for film, for television, for theater. It's sort of a collective of creators who want to tell stories that need to be told that don't get the platform to be told. So that's sort of been my newest venture in recent years. But like I said, I've been doing acting professionally since I was a kid, auditioning and going for little, commercials and tidbit roles on television, doing theater as well. I minored in theater and at the University of Waterloo when we were doing our undergrad. I was also taking. Yeah.
How did I not know that?
I did it secretly.
Yeah. You went rogue.
But
okay.
I went rogue. Yeah. Yeah, no, I would take that's part of the reason why I went to Wilfrid Laurier University, because you're allowed to take certain courses at University of Waterloo, which is sort of down the road. So I would take theater courses there and sort of it was sort of like an unofficial minor. And yeah, it's always been a part of my life to tell stories, whether I'm in front of the camera or on stage or behind the camera, helping people tell stories. And it's sort of become what I'm pursuing in life full time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And with Interspeak Digital, right?
Just Interspeak, and then we have different umbrellas underneath. So we have Interspeak Digital Media, which is more about the digital media space. Mm-hmm. We have Interspeak Pictures, which is the film industry, and then we're trying to build the Interspeak Theater Company, and so on, like other areas that we can create. But right now, the two operating ones are Interspeak Digital Media and Interspeak Pictures.
Damn, that's incredible. You got loads on your plate.
Yeah, and I also have to shout out the people I work with, because without them I wouldn't be able to do any of this. So it's Kevin Young and Jamal Aziz I've been friends with them, I think, since like elementary school.
Wow.
And we've always sort of worked together and done things, whether it was, I was in a band a couple years ago with Kevin, or just doing creative projects. And so they are the ones who sustain me and sustain this company. So big shout out to them. Yeah,
and a good support network is always helpful, completely necessary, especially in what you guys are doing. And how did the name come about, Interspeak?
Well, we knew that we wanted to we didn't just want to be any production house. We wanted to focus on stories in the margin, stories that weren't being told, and we wanted to work with artists and creators who are also in the margins, who don't get the platform to tell their story. And we wanted a name to reflect that, as opposed to just like, cool motion media or something like that. We wanted something that, could speak to our vision of the company. And so Interspeak, it was just came out of a brainstorming session. We were sitting around thinking of names. I think it was Jamal who suggested Interspeak, and we started to dissect that name and what that, it doesn't really, it's sort of a new word. It's not really a real word, but we're trying to create it as a real word and get it into the dictionary.
We should crowdfund for it to become on Merriam-Webster. Right? Yeah, I'm on it. We're on it.
Thank you. Right. But basically it just means telling the stories from within, like what is inside of you that needs to be told. To perform, we sort of think of it as a verb, to perform Interspeak is to not be afraid to tell your story, to tell what's really inside of you and translate it onto film or onto stage or into web content. So
right.
It's sort of a powerful word that symbolizes action.
Yeah, and it seems like it really touches to, I guess, grassroots acting, if that is a thing, and even just like the plurality of voices within people and their stories, and being able to connect those two and then just see where it takes you guys. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to really tell stories that have meaning. It's we don't want to just tell shallow stories, whether it's in the form of a documentary or whether it's a fiction film. We don't just do documentary work. We also want to delve more into fiction narratives and stuff. But even there are areas to tell really honest portrayals of characters, whether they're from a minority background, and not just caricatures of that minority, are really authentic, honest portrayals of people, told by or written by people within that community.
Oh man, that's amazing. And this is a question I'll ask you eventually, but even just speaking of it now, how can we support you with this? Are there any ways?
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever interested in, working with us, in terms, if you have a script that you want to produce that you just maybe can't find a production company that will take it on, or find a production company that you can trust with your story. We love working with new creators, with new talents, to tell stories that we believe that are worth telling. So, feel free to contact us if you ever want to work with us, or even if you're just interested in film production or any aspect of what we do. If you're interested in becoming a stage manager, or you have a play that you want to, put on stage. We're still a startup production company, and so the more people we can build on this team, the better. The more creative heads, the better. We'd love to have you a part of Interspeak. It's a very small team right now, so the more people, the better. That's sort of really it. I mean, financial contributions too is also good, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Oh man. And so if anyone, it's a great way of paying it forward. So if anyone wants to hit them up, I'll leave the contact forms in my show notes. So that will be available. But then, okay, so how did you get in what was that process of going into acting? And now you've completely, there's been a huge journey to the point where you started your own production company and you're reading scripts and everything. So how did you start initially? What was that like getting into it?
Initially, I had no interest in getting into filmmaking. I definitely didn't want to be behind the camera. My goal when I was a kid, if you were to ask me a couple years ago what my goal was to work as an actor in Toronto for a couple of years, build up enough work, enough stuff on my resume, and then eventually move to LA and work as an actor there to gain experience. And because LA, that's if you're a lumberjack, you go where the trees are, so that's where all the work is. Yeah. So that was my plan, But I remember, when I was in university. I got into acting professionally, I think, when I was 12. I was taking acting classes on weekends, and my acting teacher, she said, "Oh, you'd be great for, television and stuff." So she recommended me to her agency, and then I went and auditioned for them, and then I signed with them. I think I was about 12 or 13, which was great because I was able to learn at an early age what it was like in this industry, like what it's like to go on auditions and to prepare for roles for films, and just learn sort of the ins and outs of like working on a set. And so I had been doing that up until I was about 18, 19. And then when I went to university, because our university was outside of Toronto, I had to sort of put a pause on acting because it's very difficult to commute back and forth for auditions, and it's sort of taboo to turn down an audition, so I didn't want to do that. So I sort of put a hold on it. But the one moment that made me really stop and kind of consider other options was I just signed with a new agent because I was sort of frustrated with some of the roles I was being called out for. I had reached a certain age. The beard started to grow, and I started getting called for more terrorist roles, which is very common for a lot of Arabs, South Asians, anyone that looks, like a terrorist, quote unquote.
Right.
So I've been being called out for those roles, and in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, it's fine. I'm an actor. I should be able to play anything." And that's what anyone tells you in the acting industry. It's like, don't be picky. You have to just go with what you get. And that's why you see a lot of these Arab actors playing these terrorist roles over and over. It's the same group of people who play these things because, that's the only work they get. They're working consistently, but they know that they can't get anything else. So people would tell me, like, just don't worry about it. Just go with it. And the more I started to, when I got into university, I started reading things like Edward Said's Orientalism and learning more. Like, I saw Jack Shaheen's documentary called Real Bad Arabs, which is like changed my life. And it sort of changed my perspective of like, do I want to be portraying this really problematic representation of my own people? Like I always thought, like, if I played a terrorist on television or in a film and my family back home in Morocco saw it, I would feel ashamed. I would feel embarrassed to show it to them. And especially with the state of our ummah and the state of what's happening all around the world and the, Islamophobia and stuff, to contribute to that would just be wrong. I just wasn't comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so I remember I signed with a new agent. I was really excited. And I was hoping that this would be a change. And the first phone call I get from him was like, "Hey, I got you an audition for a show called Nikita," which was a really big show back then.
I feel like I remember that. Was that about werewolves, or is that completely?
I never saw the show.
Okay.
But I think it was just more of a thriller, kind of like Homeland or something.
There's a fun show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was something like that, and he was like, "Yeah, I got you an audition for it." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And he's like, "I sent you an email with the breakdown and stuff like that and the lines." And so I checked the email, and the first thing I see is the character's name is Yemeni terrorist number 3, and the lines were just the most like stereotypical crap that I've ever seen. It was like, soon the Americans will learn our message, and like just really.
Oh my god!
Crap. And I was so upset and so fed up. I called him back and I said, "Listen, you have to turn this down. I can't do this." And I explained to him why, and he was kind of confused because nobody had really turned down auditions, especially for a big American network show. And I explained to him why, and then after that, I realized, you know what? I think I just need to take a break from acting, figure out my own priorities, my own red line of what I will do and what I won't, and then revisit this later. And so that's when I sort of put a pause on acting. I finished my undergrad and master's, and I'm just getting back into it now. I'm just now back in Toronto full time, trying to get with a new agency. but those years in my undergrad really shaped how I see the industry and see the kind of career that I wanted to take. And so to answer your question, how I got into filmmaking from acting, I realized that the only way for me to be satisfied with a career as an actor, and not the only way, but one of the ways, is to control the narrative, is to not just be in front of the camera, but behind the camera, or be in the writer's room. And so that's what sort of led me to content creation and filmmaking. Shortly after that experience, I wrote and filmed a web series called Fame and Fidelity, which is on YouTube. And that was sort of like a therapeutic experience for me. It's a web series. Yeah, it's a web series about, it's a comedy about a young Muslim actor who's trying to make it in Hollywood, but keeps getting typecast as the terrorist. And it's sort of his journey of like trying to shake that off and be successful in this industry. And it's a lot of real stories from my experience as an actor in those audition rooms, talking to casting agents, reading the descriptions of these roles. And so that was really, therapeutic for me, because I was able to work through a lot of that frustration of, what do I do? Like, can I be a working actor if I'm going to, have that red tape of I'm not going to play these roles? And doing that web series, I learned that I enjoy filmmaking, and filmmaking is a great way to tell really honest stories. And this is something that I could see myself doing in addition to acting, so that it's not, people think that the only way to break into the acting industry is just through the front door. It's just you audition and then you get a role. But there's so many other ways into that industry. There's so many back doors and side doors, and filmmaking and telling your own story through film or through just theater is another way in. And it's a way for you to tell stories more authentically and be more comfortable with the roles that you play, and also give other actors opportunity too. With that web series, we were able to give a lot of actors opportunities to play different roles. They came on set and told us similar stories, and they're like, I went on an audition just like this one when I was younger, or just recently, and so so that's what sort of led me into it, was just the frustration of not being able to play more authentic roles and wanting to sort of control the narrative or just be a part of the narrative creation.
Right. And representation is something that's so important. Just like even as a kid, I mean, I definitely don't remember seeing brown Muslim kids anywhere on any media platform. And so now when you see certain, South Asians coming out like Riz Ahmed coming and winning an Emmy, and you feel more connected to the medium. And I think that's so important. And I think because of people like yourself who are breaking those barriers down, they're actually contributing to that knowledge production, or that the knowledge that inspires and is inspired by those mediums such as filmmaking is really important.
For sure.
So
it's not easy too. I mean, Riz Ahmed, he also in his early career had to play those kind of roles, like the stereotypical stuff, and it's and he's even talked about it, where he said, sometimes you have to take those roles and stand out in order to get to a place where he doesn't get cast and that kind of stuff anymore. But I got lucky where I had friends who were also studying filmmaking or in television broadcasting who had the experience to come together and say, let's start a production company. But not a lot of people do. Most people just write scripts and try and sell them to networks and stuff. And you sometimes get lucky with the Little Mosque on the Prairie, that was just sort of a huge luck. And I spoke to Zarka Nawaz, the creator, about that, and she said, she'd never worked as a writer before. She just kind of struck gold with that series. So it's tough. I recognize how lucky I am to be able to be in this position where I can tell my own stories and sort of get into the industry through this way. But I feel bad for a lot of Muslim actors, or just actors of minority who have to kowtow to what casting agents want, and just sort of with the hope that if I do this, then eventually I'll be able to play other roles. And sometimes you can. Sometimes you have the Riz Ahmed success story, but he's unfortunately still in the minority.
Yeah, yeah. But do you think things are still changing? Like, do you think if somebody was to approach acting now, do you think things have changed enough, perhaps, where there are normal roles that they can take as opposed to those stereotypical ones? Or what still needs to be done, do you think? Or what kind of conversations need to be have
for Muslims? Or
for Muslims, yeah.
There's still a lot. No, I would say no. I don't think so.
You don't.
I think we're still working through diversity representation with other minority groups. The Black community is starting to get better in terms of representation in Hollywood. I think what's now being addressed is the Asian community, and that's still very problematic, but starting to move to a place of progression. I think in terms of, I say Muslim, but that's such a blanket term, but in terms of, Arab representation or South Asian representation, it has not really gotten much better. Even Riz Ahmed, he was in that show The Night Of, which is the HBO series. He still played someone who was on trial for a crime. It's very minute changes, and for every Riz Ahmed positive role, there's 10 other terrorist roles out there, or terrorist representations in Hollywood. So, and I think part of that has to do with sort of the foreign policy of the U.S. right now. The ISIS and the Islamic extremist terrorists is sort of threat number one for the country, and Hollywood has that history of demonizing the enemy. Whether it was the Soviets and the communists, or whoever was the enemy of the state at that time, film was used to paint them as the evil person, the bad guy, the villain, to drum up, patriotism and support of the nation. So I think as long as this focus on Islamic extremism as threat number one in the U.S. is prevalent, we're not really going to see a big change in that in representation. I think there have been small little progressions, and definitely I've noticed there's a lot more call out of that sort of thing. Whenever there's a problematic representation of a Muslim, I've noticed a lot more people now are paying attention to that. And, Facebook lights up with articles and comments and posts about how problematic it is. So I think that's changed. People are now being a lot more outspoken, especially actors in Hollywood are speaking out a little bit more. Diversity is definitely a hot topic, more so than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think we slowly are moving to that place. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just about on-camera actors or on-camera artists. We need more Muslim writers. We need more Muslim directors, Muslim producers, people, because that's really where things change, is behind the camera, is in the casting room, is in the writer's room. It's not just about having Muslim actors. So that's sort of, I think it'll take a while, but it's better than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, which actually leads nicely to your play, I Am Rohingya, because you were a Muslim director, and it was a collaborative project to highlight the genocide of the Rohingya community. So how did this, and the play is titled I Am Rohingya, right? And so how did this play come about? And then if you could just give us a synopsis, I guess, on what exactly it is about.
Sure. I Am Rohingya is a 4-act play featuring only Rohingya youth from the community in Kitchener. The audience through the journey of the Rohingya community. So it's in 4 acts, and the first act starts off in the Rakhine state, in the villages, when Rohingyas and Buddhists got along, when things were fine in their villages and their community. It sort of shows the spirit of the people, the culture, the food, the clothing, and shows how beautiful this community is. And then as we move through the play, we see the invasion of the soldiers taking away their homes and their families. We see the exodus of the Rohingya people having to flee the country on foot and by boat. What life was like in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. And then finally in Act 4, resettling in Canada, and how it's not as rosy as people think. You know, certainly they're safe here, but they still experience Islamophobia, they still experience hardships. So it sort of takes the audience through the experience of these people. And the first half is sort of the stories of their parents. The cast consists of youth only. So the first half is more the stories of the parents, what they went through. And then the second half is about the kids and their experiences, because most of the kids were born in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. I got involved in it in the summer of 2015. I was working as an intern for Muslim Social Services in Kitchener-Waterloo. There's community social service organization who had some funding to do a project with the Rohingya youth. And originally they had wanted to do sort of refugee workshops. So it was things like, drug abuse workshops, anger management, stuff like that.
Right.
Like things that you would typically think refugees might need.
Mm-hmm.
But I was sort of uncomfortable with that. I didn't know if any of them had drug problems or if any of them really needed this.
Right, we're typecasting again.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, let's meet with them first and speak with them and hear what they want, what they have to say. So I met with a bunch of them, and I sort of told them straight up, I was like, listen, we have some money to do something this summer. What do you guys want to do? And they all unanimously said that they want to tell their story. They felt that nobody really knew who they were. They didn't like that. They didn't like that people didn't even know Rohingya. They couldn't even pronounce Rohingya. Yeah. And they wanted to do something to tell a story. And it was one of the youth, Ahmed, who was the eldest, who suggested doing a play. And I thought that was perfect because I've been doing theater my entire life.
Right.
I never directed a play before, though, but I had worked with enough directors and done enough theater to figure out how to do it along the way. So after that day, we decided, okay, great, let's meet every week and put together a show. And so that's what it was. It was every week, every weekend, we met, and it started off originally with them sharing stories, because I didn't know much about their experiences, and if we were going to do a play about them, we had to learn about them. So it was just really in the beginning sort of circle discussions, talking about their stories. They would share their own personal experiences, they would share their parents' stories, and I would just be sitting there taking notes. And eventually we all constructed the play together, decided what it was going to be about, and then we got it on its feet. We had constructed a script based on their stories, and they were the ones that came up with the title, I Am Rohingya. And when I asked them why they wanted to call it that, they said, one, it forces people to say the name. It's like, oh, what play are you going to tonight? Oh, I'm seeing a play called I Am Rohingya. Oh, Rohingya, what's that? Yeah. It sort of starts a discussion. Just by saying the name, sort of reaffirms their existence. It keeps the name alive. And that's sort of the statement, is I am Rohingya. It's not just, this is my ethnicity. It's like, I exist. I'm not going to be erased. So it's very much a form of protest, a form of resistance.
That's
and
beautiful.
so Sorry?
No, I was just going to say that's beautiful. I mean, I know even because I've had a chance to see the play on opening night, and I had that intent had that direct impact, because as soon as I was saying, oh yeah, I'm going to go see I Am Rohingya, and you're right, and they're right, it definitely did prompt that conversation. and the amount of people, and Muslims included, that didn't know what was happening to the people in our ummah was baffling, and it was heartbreaking. But definitely, again, it prompted that discussion, and hopefully, we need to figure out what our role is in being ethical witnesses to this play and to the conversation, the images that we see around this genocide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this play was very much, it comes with a responsibility when you see it. And, like you said, as a witness, like you're now witnessing people not just tell stories about genocide, but reenacting them. We have kids who are reenacting things that they went through. One of the scenes in Act 3 is a girl, Ruma, when she was younger in the camps, she saw her best friend get killed in front of her, and she was hiding and trying to avoid being seen, and she couldn't do anything about it. She just had to sit there and watch her friend get killed. Yeah. And she had to reenact that in front of an audience. And so it's not easy for them. And so, it definitely comes with that responsibility of, if you're going to sit there and watch this play, you have a responsibility now to go and tell people about the Rohingyas, share their experience, tell people what you saw. And the kids make it very clear. I mean, I don't know if you remember after that performance, one of the youth, Raisel, got up and took the mic and said, we just showed you guys our experiences. Now, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do for our people? And I didn't know he was going to do that. That was completely improvised. Yeah. We didn't plan that at all. But, the youth try to make it very clear that this show comes with a cost. You see it. It's not just a piece of art to enjoy. It's a responsibility to take it and share it with other people. So, yeah.
And I would like to get into that in a bit, but just unpacking, I guess, the process of it and creating this play and directing, like, what concerns did you have beforehand, before, when it was set that, okay, you guys were going to do a play? Did you have okay, now what? Like, how am I going to do this? What are we going to tell? What's my role? Did you have that disconnect between their experiences and yours, and their cultures and yours? How did you mitigate those?
Yeah, it was a very different experience. Like I've done theater a lot, but I've never done a play like this. I've never been a part of a process like this. This was very much a play that was built collaboratively from the ground up. Typically with theater, it's you have the playwright, you have the script, and the script is holy. You don't touch it. You just do what the director says, read the lines, and that's it. Especially with traditional plays like Shakespeare and stuff.
Right.
So this was very much the opposite of that, where I would write a scene based on their stories, and we would go through it. And as we'd be rehearsing it, the youth would say, "Oh, you know what? This line doesn't really work. I don't like this. This is not what we would say, or this isn't really what happened." And then we would rework it there. That's why, I mean, the whole process of the beginning of the play to opening night was about 9 months. So it was a long time. Typically plays this size, I mean, the show is an hour, should take really 3 to 4 months to put together. Mm-hmm. But the reason why it took that long is because sometimes we would just spend rehearsal reworking the scene, to make it more authentic. And sometimes the youth had to sort of work through it and act through it to figure out what works and what doesn't. So it was difficult on that sense to step back as a director. I had to sort of catch myself and say, okay, I'm just going to let the kids take this on, and whatever they come up with, I'm going to support. So there was a lot of moments like that where I had to sort of step back and let the kids take over. But at the same time, there were moments where I had to step in and sort of take over in a sense, because it's still a play. It still needs direction. It still needs a focus. And when you have 14 kids all in a room, and by the way, the age group of these kids is so big. It's, our youngest cast member, Jaber, is 8 years old, and the oldest, Ahmed, was 21. Yeah. And we had everyone in between, all high school, elementary school. So 14 kids all through different age ranges in one room trying to put a play together is not easy. So just as a director, finding those moments of when I need to step in and when I need to step back was something I was constantly working through. And also just, we were dealing with very difficult scenes of execution, scenes of rape, and these are kids too. And as much as we wanted to be explicit, and as much as we wanted to be honest about what was happening in Burma, we didn't want to be gratuitous. We didn't want to put these kids through things like that would further traumatize them. I'm not a social worker. We had a social worker on site in the very beginning, but it really wasn't helping. So,
can I ask why it wasn't helping?
Well, I think these kids, it's hard to say. Again, it's sort of that assumption that these kids are so traumatized that they need to talk to a therapist or a social worker to work through it. And we realized very quickly that that's not how they operate. They work through these things collectively and by, reenacting it and through the rehearsal process. It wasn't like they needed, mental health support after that. These were very strong, very resilient kids.
Yeah.
But just from our perspective, myself and Zainab, who was the co-director and was the coordinator of MSS at the time, Muslim Social Services, we were very cognizant of trying not to push these kids too much. And so we tried to be very careful with certain scenes. There was the hardest scene I think to try and figure out was the scene about rape and sexual assault. We didn't, want to be too gratuitous with it, but the kids and their parents even were very insistent on that being in the show, because that was and is a very big reality for the Rohingya people. So trying to figure out how to do a scene about rape with kids in it is extremely hard to do, and extremely hard to talk to with the kids, So we worked through it by just sort of alluding to it. So there's a scene where a girl, Janitera, gets dragged away by two Buddhist soldiers and screaming off stage. And it's sort of, we don't show anything. We don't say, she was raped or sexually assaulted, but we leave it to the audience to imagine what could have happened to her. It's a very difficult thing to work around, and so that was tough. It's like, how do we tell the story of a genocide with so many different horrible, vile human rights violations with kids? How do we tell it artistically so that it's not gratuitous, so that it doesn't lose the point? That was definitely a challenge. But like I said, it was the kids that really got us through it. They, not once did I see them have, break down or have to leave the room. They just kept going. They wanted to push it further and further. We were actually the ones, as directors, we were the ones who kind of reeled it back, but the kids always wanted to push it forward because they always said, no, we want people to know what happened. So they were pretty much game for everything. But it's definitely a difficult story to tell.
Yeah. And in the aftermath of the play, were there, because part of therapy is having to again revisit those acts, those scenes, those emotions. So after the play, well, I guess the initial play, was it difficult for them to I don't know, not deal with it, because they were dealing with they're still dealing with it, and they were dealing with it throughout the play, but did it impact them in a way that was unexpected, I guess, afterwards? Do you know?
I think, I don't think it had I think it was definitely therapeutic for them to be able to have done that in front of so many people. These are very private stories, private memories that they just performed in front of 500 people. So the aftermath was an incredible change in their sense of confidence, and their sense of agency. And even to this day, I mean, the kids where they started, they were very shy. Many of them didn't really talk too much, kind of quiet kids. Now are completely outspoken. They tell me that they're able to now to talk in class in front of their peers. I noticed that sometimes some of the older kids are now sort of become activists in their community. Ahmed, who's sort of the oldest one, has sort of been all over the news, and he was at the UN and has been very outspoken. And I notice sometimes in his speeches, he'll pull a line from the play, one of his lines about the Rohingya people, and I notice it's like straight out of the play.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like this has become their own monologue. This has become their. It's like they didn't know how to articulate the experience of being a Rohingya, and now they have that. Now they have a script or a way to articulate it, whether it's through dialogue from the play or whether it's just through the scenes that they do. They now have a frame of reference to articulate their emotions. So it was incredibly empowering for all of them.
Yeah.
And I think certainly helped them work through a lot of their experiences. And their parents too. I mean, their parents have seen the play every time we've performed it. And, it's not just, the kids are not just performing their experiences, they're performing their parents' experiences. They're playing their parents in a few scenes. So I think it's also therapeutic for their parents to see it. And when we interviewed them for the film, they were relieved. They're like, finally we have something that tells the story of our people. And, everything in the play was corroborated by them. They said, yeah, everything is correct in here. Nothing is untrue. And so for them also, they're relieved that they have something out there that is honest and, validates these very personal stories of theirs that they'd never told anyone. Some of the stories the parents shared with us for the documentary, they hadn't even told their kids. We as we were interviewing them, we had their kids sort of translating it to us because most of them spoke Rohingya, and the kids were kind of shocked because they hadn't heard this stuff. So I think for everyone, for the entire community, this was definitely a validation of their experiences, that they feel that they didn't just go through all of this in vain. It's going towards something good.
Yeah, a form of intergenerational healing as well after all those effects.
Definitely.
Wow. And then, so how did you deal with this emotionally? I mean, were there challenges for you in just understanding the history of this genocide, understanding the actions that have been performed and that they've had to endure, and then, going through the process of collaborating with this play and being around the intensity of the conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's this project has sort of been the center of my life for the past almost 3 years now. So it's the Rohingya genocide is definitely something that is on my mind every single day because I've been involved in this project for so long. But yeah, during that process, it's definitely difficult. Like there are days when you'd come home and just feel drained because it was just a really emotional day with the kids, and even just in the early process of researching the issue for the script, there's only so much you can take in before feeling burnt out and just emotionally drained.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been difficult, but I always tell myself that if it's hard for me, I can't imagine how difficult it is for the community. And to be honest, they were the ones that sustained me. It was the kids really who never felt that burden of emotional weight. Like every rehearsal, they had uplifting spirits. There were days when it sort of got to them and rehearsal ended on a sort of more solemn note. But the kids were the ones who kind of kept that momentum going of let's not wallow in this sadness. Let's work through the play and get it, going. But yeah, it was a lot to deal with. It's definitely emotionally draining sometimes when you're just constantly surrounded or just enveloped in this horrible crisis that doesn't seem to be getting better, and especially in recent days, it's just been getting worse.
Yeah.
But you have to find time to detach yourself from that, just for the sake of your own health and your own well-being.
Yeah.
So, I'm fortunate enough to, like I said, work with good friends who, were able to work productively, but also take time to detach from this and have a little bit of self-care. So that was really important. And, but, it doesn't get easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. It always, and I think it shouldn't. You should always, you shouldn't lose that sense of emotional weight. I think that always should stay with you to remind you of what is happening. And there were some times where, we would have rehearsals and it would be a lot of laughs and jokes because, it's still kids we're working with and they enjoyed rehearsal. They saw it as a fun time. But sometimes if things got too silly, I was always uncomfortable with kind of trying to remind the kids, like, hey, listen, we're trying to do a scene about execution. Stop goofing around and stuff. It was always uncomfortable for me to have to remind the kids of that. But it was sometimes the older kids would step in and kind of yell at the younger kids and say, hey, listen, like, think about what you're doing right now. This is not a joke. This is not time to goof around. We're a lot of times, and we're lucky that we had the cameras rolling because we caught some of those moments of the kids keeping the other kids in check.
Right.
So there was always, we never got away with forgetting about what we were doing. That was always, I think, hanging over our heads, and still is to this day. For me, there's an incredible amount of responsibility on my head as the sort of creative director of this entire project. I have an entire community who's trusted us to tell their stories, properly.
Yeah.
They shared very intimate stories with us. The kids trusted us to reenact their stories for them. There's a lot of trust that's been built over this few years, and so as a director and as a filmmaker, it's a lot of pressure to make sure that this play is sold out or that the film gets into film festivals. It's constantly, I don't want to let this community down. It's not really about, I want this to be successful or I want it to make money. It's like, I really don't want to let this community down and let all of this be in vain. Because it would just be, and it's like this, this with research, researchers come in, interview, vulnerable communities, and then just take their info and what does the community get in return? They get nothing.
Yeah.
I really don't want that to happen with this project. I want to make sure that their stories are seen and heard.
100%. And it sounds like it's a matter of, because you don't want to become desensitized. I mean, I feel like when we're seeing image after image, which is sometimes I'm scrolling through Twitter and it's hard not to be like, oh, look, another war, another genocide, another terrorist attack, and just getting into that the monotony of that, and really taking a step back and saying, no, there shouldn't be this, us versus them mentality. It's there needs to be a form of compassionate witnessing, and actively wanting to change that for just the general health of the humanity and basic bloody decency. But there's I don't know, what worries me, I guess, always is just an economy of indifference, where we'll just perpetuate and circle these images and the sensationalized news, but it's only on our time when it's convenient for us, and us being, there's a plethora of us, but even just the West, and and just how do we try and make sure that this issue, this genocide, doesn't just become indifferent to us and isn't just there isn't a timeline for when it is sensationalized, and that's when we respond, that's when we react, and then the next biggest thing comes again. I mean, did the actors themselves, did they ever disclose to you any, I mean, not the confidential things, but anything that, you know, they hoped would be the impact within the broader community for this, or you know, how they want outsiders to carry out their responsibility as witnesses to this genocide?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of main goal for them was that to spread awareness. That was number one. I mean, that was the goal that started this entire project. Was they just wanted people to know who the Rohingya people were. That was sort of the overarching goal. But a lot of them saw this also as a political tool. I mean, they were hoping that, you know, we would get members of parliament to come and see the play, or we would get, you know, I remember even Ahmed, before opening night, called Prime Minister Trudeau's office and left a voicemail and invited him to the play. And he came in, he's like, yeah, you know, I invited the Prime Minister, and so I'm sure he'll come. Can you guys reserve a seat for him and stuff?
Just slips that in.
Yeah, so like they had and you know, some of them were like, you know, it'd be cool if, you know, the Burmese government hears about this play. You know, because they very much saw this as hoping to get to that level of getting government attention. And, you know, we did get a lot of, there was a lot of ripples that came out of this project. We did actually end up meeting Prime Minister Trudeau. We were invited to an event where we were able to meet him, and we were there because they'd heard about the play. You know, and the play was covered by Rohingya Vision TV, which plays out in Malaysia. So you know, the play got to that part of the world. People in Burma had messaged us about the play and were excited about it. So it definitely had ripples, and still does to this day. But for sure, the kids really wanted this. For them, was their way of fighting against the government.
Yeah.
You know, the government is trying to erase the Rohingya people. They've successfully brushed any Rohingya resistance movements under the rug. Yeah. So this very much, the fact that it was getting a lot of traction was its own form of protest. And it certainly on a community level, they told me afterwards, you know, people would come up to them and be like, hey, you're that kid from the Rohingya play. And they were being like recognized in the streets. And for them, that was a win, because now their own community where they lived, a large portion of them started to know who they were. And so that was, I think, enough for so many of them. And even to this day, as the situation intensifies, the kids want to do another performance of it, because they see this as, you know, the ideal time to perform the play. And so for them, it's, you know, the performance is sort of like a tool that they use when they need to. So,
and they're not just like assimilating into Canadian society. They're actively agents in molding what the fabric of this society looks like and can look like. And should look like. But even with Trudeau, I mean, was that a one-off thing, or have there been conversations after that, or, you know, any actions from the Canadian government, or are the youth left with a feeling of frustration that, you know, we met with them, it went so far, and now what's happening, you know?
Yeah, I think that event specifically was a one-off thing. It was just sort of like a meet and greet, take a picture, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But, you know, I had expected that going in. I didn't expect to have a sit-down meeting with him to discuss the future of the Rohingya people. Right. It was symbolic for Ahmed, who met him, because to his knowledge, he was the first Rohingya person to meet a Canadian Prime Minister in history. Wow. So just for the community and for him, that was big. Yeah. But after that event, I met with a few individuals who actually wanted to approach the Canadian government about doing something for the Rohingya people. And I've been working with an immigration lawyer and some MPs to push forward some more concrete actions for the Rohingya people. The Canadian government has been doing okay. I mean, Trudeau has just released a letter that was a little more strongly condemning Aung San Suu Kyi and the Burmese government.
Yeah.
So that's I guess a step forward. You know, they have given some. They just gave another $2.5 million in humanitarian aid in the camp. So, you know, they're doing okay, but there's definitely a lot more they can be doing.
Yeah.
And I think the Rohingya community definitely agrees with that. I think they would like to see more efforts from the Canadian government. They'd like to see pressure on the Burmese governments. They'd like to maybe see a government resettlement program for Rohingyas. You know, there's only been just over 300 Rohingyas in Canada, and they came about 10 years ago. That's pretty pathetic, you know, compared to, for example, the Syrian resettlement program. So there's a lot of things that Canada can be doing that they're not right now, but I've certainly been able to, after that meeting and because of this play, been able to connect with certain individuals and organizations and members of parliament to try to push forward more concrete actions that Canada can be doing.
Yeah. So that's something for all of us within the Canadian community and the Canadian Muslim community to start working on. And perhaps I can revisit this in later podcasts, but, you know, as the journey continues on ways that we can support these initiatives and support
I think,
this.
like, going back to your point of, like, you know, people feeling burnt out and, like, you know, that sort of indifference. I think, especially for the Muslim community, you know, you pick any Muslim country and there's a conflict going on. So it's so hard to feel that empathy constantly because, you know, you feel bad for the Rohingya people and then suddenly something about the Syrians or something about Yemen or, you know, Somalia or, you know, it's constant. And so it's impossible for the Muslim community to just always, you know, you can have a certain empathy for all of these people, but it won't translate into anything tangible. And, you know, I don't think that a lot of people like to spread themselves too thin. Like, they like to speak out about every single issue. And I think it's almost impossible to do that. I think it's important to pick a cause that speaks to you and do what you can and use your own positionality to do something for it. You can't go to every single protest and you know, try to advocate for everything. I think what's most important is, you know, pick something that you feel like you can contribute to and just work towards that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely difficult. Like, I've sort of picked the Rohingya issue for the past few years, but I definitely still feel that helplessness in terms of the Syrian conflict or, you know, anything really, Yemen. But you have to just remember that, you know, whatever you're doing for this specific cause is important and is valid, and you can't let yourself be emotionally distracted. You have to just continue fighting and working.
Right. And there are so many distractions in this world today.
Yeah.
But I think if we have people to support us for sustainable activism and action and, you know, being able to see who's doing what is important. And I don't know. I mean, no, you know what? You worded that really well. I don't really have too much to add to that. But you're
tough.
right. It is really tough. It's
especially, I think, for the Muslim community because there's just so many conflicts.
Yeah, and when we think about, like, you know, our responsibility to each other and, you know, on the day of judgment when we're kind of questioned and everything, how, you know, we almost have this, like, worry of, like, okay, like, did I speak out enough about this or did I do enough for this? Like, how do you position yourself? Exactly that, but also, you know, I don't know. It's so hard to think about what your responsibility is, not just for this life, but for the next life. You know, there's so that double identity kind of that you're facing over there. But I think if we stick to one, hopefully there can be some form of lasting impact, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And if you can find ways, let's say that you're passionate about the crisis in Syria right now. There's not just. Sometimes it seems like out of reach, like it's so far away. I can't do anything about it. There's ways that are tangible for you to contribute to that, whether it's just awareness or whether it's activism or raising money or just whatever you can do in your own, using your own skill set.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I mean, like, I am trying to figure out a way to use art and filmmaking and theater to change the reality of the Rohingya people and trying to figure out how that works. So it's not impossible to, if you're in business or if you're an architect or if you're, whatever, use what you know, use what you have, and try and think of creative ways to make a change, because there's plenty of people out there doing humanitarian relief and aid. As much as I'd love to go to Bangladesh right now in the camps and help the Rohingya people, as much as I'd love to be there with them, I know that that's not going to help. In fact, there's people there who say, don't come. Like, we have enough people. Use what you can in your own locale, in your own country. And that can sometimes be more impactful.
Yeah, and I feel like we don't give enough credence to that, or maybe don't even understand our systems enough to know what kind of impact we have. So that's something that we should all definitely be looking into. Now,
use your privilege.
Yeah, yes. And so one final question, I guess, around the play. If there's anything that you could do differently, or maybe you've had these conversations with the youth, what would they be surrounding this play?
On what we would do differently?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things I would have liked to do differently if I had my go at it again. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much more to tell. It's interesting. We did the play, and then the play was primarily based on the stories of the kids and just what they shared with us. But after the play was done, we went and interviewed the parents for the documentary. Mm-hmm. And we heard so many new stories, so many new things that I would have loved to include in the play. And even also with the kids, we learned new things after the play was over, because, trust takes time to build, and some of the kids felt comfortable sharing things later on in our experience.
Yeah.
So, if I had my go at it again, and I'm sure if the kids did too, I think we would just want to make it longer and add more stories to the play. I think especially with what's happening right now, the narrative of the play mainly was the silence and how nobody's paying attention. But now I think it would be a very different experience, because people are paying attention now. It's on the headlines every day. It's getting so much news coverage to this day. I think if we were to do the play again, it would be a completely different theme. It would be about just the direness of it, mm-hmm. not just about getting people's attention. It's just getting people to act right away. Yeah. I think there would be a different sense of urgency to the play, because it's amazing to see how just in the span of a month or two, all the world's attention is on the Rohingya crisis. So I would definitely love to maybe even write a new show. Like, I Am Rohingya was, I feel like, pertinent at that time when we performed it, but I'd love to work with the kids to tell a new story, and maybe even involve some of the parents. I know some of the parents expressed that they would have liked to also be a part of the play. So what would that like to have parents and kids in a play together?
Yeah. So maybe we can look forward to a part 2 of that. Which would be exciting. Yeah. And
gotta finish the film first.
This would help. Yeah. And so how can we, you mentioned that they're thinking of doing another performance of the play. Is that something that is in the works?
Well, not immediately. Mm-hmm. Right now, our main effort is the documentary, which is coming out hopefully in the next few months.
So is there any way we can support that documentary right now, in the stages that it's at right now, or is that something for afterwards?
Yeah, definitely if you would like to support it, you can visit our social media. Right now the film is also titled I Am Rohingya, but we're going to be releasing a new. We have a new exciting title for the film that we're going to be releasing hopefully next week, along with a new teaser trailer and new poster design and everything. So it's sort of a relaunch of the film, and just to sort of drum up anticipation for it. So you can right now visit our social media, and you can sort of spread the word about it. We try to post updates on the film and pictures and videos. So just sort of, spreading awareness is always huge. If you want to contribute financially, you can feel free to get in touch with me. We did have a Launch Good campaign where we raised over $16,000 for the film, but our production budget is much higher, and we haven't quite hit the mark yet. So if you're interested in sponsoring the film, or even being a producer on it, feel free to get in touch with me, and we can figure that out. And then when the film releases, we're trying to push it out as fast as possible. Our goal really is to get the film on every continent. We want to submit to various film festivals around the world. So if it's in a place nearby you, if it's in a screening nearby you, please go and see it and bring your friends, and or if it's not in your city, get in touch with us to request it, and we'll try and bring it to you. Like I said, we really want to make sure this film is seen around the world, and especially now, it's so important that it's seen. So, there's lots of ways you could support it before the release and after.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to leave the links for the social media of I Am Rohingya and yours as well, so that they can get in contact with you if they'd like to sponsor or support financially or as producers and everything.
That'd be great.
And actually, I didn't get a chance to ask you this before, but how was it an organic process becoming an actor-activist, or because just throughout the conversation, it seems like it's almost been a very organic process, but perhaps I'm just reading into that, melding the two worlds.
Yeah, it was. No, it definitely was. I mean, that was the thing I was trying to figure out during my undergrad and master's was, I always had a passion for acting and for entertainment and media, but I also had a passion for activism and for social justice and social issues. And this project was really impactful for me in my life, because I finally figured out how those two worlds can be brought together. And it was a very organic process. I didn't know if I Am Rohingya was going to work. I mean, the play might have flopped. Nobody may have came, or it just might not have had the effects that we had hoped for. So it was very organic. It was very much a trial process. But now, having almost being finished with it, I've seen the numerous effects of how art and social justice can collide and can have incredible impacts on not just the community involved, but the global community. This play has spread awareness to a lot of people, and it's led to a lot of opportunities now where we're able to, work with the government to try and bring about a solution to the end of the crisis. Or now some of the youth are being able to speak out, and they're on the news or going to the UN. So all of this originated from a play. And so for me, it was really like a relieving moment to know that I can do what I love, my passion of acting and theater and filmmaking, and also know that it can have really tangible impacts on social issues, on minority communities, on marginalized communities. And this project was really an example of that.
Yeah. And so would you have any advice for any budding activists that are trying to break through? And I mean, we're in Canada over here, so perhaps context specific to here.
For sure. It's really helpful to have people to work with, I would say. If you have friends or allies or supporters who you can work with to help bring your vision, whatever it is, to life, don't do it alone. Find people to work with who will share your vision, because it just makes your life so much easier. And the more supporters, the more allies, the better. And just don't be afraid to tell an honest story and be creative with it. I mean, that's, especially now in this industry, that's what really stands out is more creative ideas. Don't think that, the Rohingya, at the time when we started this, the Rohingya, nobody knew about the Rohingyas. Nobody knew who they were, what was happening. And so it was in a way a risk for us, doing this play, and especially doing this documentary. Up until this point, we were so worried that this documentary would flop because nobody is going to care about the Rohingyas. Nobody knows, so nobody's going to go and see it. But you still have to take that risk, and you can either look at it like that, oh, nobody knows about the Rohingyas, nobody's going to see it, or you can look at it like, this is great, nobody knows about the Rohingyas, so this is the perfect opportunity to tell it. So it's really about your perspective, and I would just say don't be afraid to push the envelope and be honest about what you tell, and it can have really amazing impacts on yourself as a creator and as on other people. But take the risk. I mean, our Muslim community, really sometimes does not, or most of the time does not encourage you to go into the arts. Mm-hmm. And I'm always telling people who are interested in it, just please do it. Please, you have some part of your artistic interest in your life, even if it's just a hobby. It doesn't have to be your main pursuit. Included in your life. I think I always ask people what their passion is. And it's usually when you ask them that question, it has something to do with an art skill. Because I think everyone is an artist and everyone has the potential to be an artist. So I think don't let people, whether it's cultural pressure or family pressure, don't let them extinguish that flame that you have. Whether it's to be an actor or to be a painter or to be a writer. There's ways to do that where, you can carve out a career or a niche for yourself. We complain and moan about lack of representation, lack of diversity in this industry. But if we're not willing to change that, to be in that industry, then nothing's going to change. That's why nothing's changed. It's because none of us are there to change it. So take the risk and do art and allow others to tell their story through art as well. It can have really amazing impacts.
Damn. Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for that wisdom. I mean, yes, people don't be afraid to tell honest stories and take risks. And you're right. Art is something, I remember with art and just stories in themselves. Thomas King, he's an indigenous writer, I believe. And remember, his famous line is the truth about stories is that that's all we are. So right. It is. I mean, it's exactly how oral history has survived, written history has survived, just narratives have survived or been extinguished. So it's important that we keep telling our stories and using our privileges to tell those stories.
Yeah.
And so, two final questions, because I'm definitely, wary of the time here, but where I'm interested in hope, because I find it so hard to grasp onto hope at times, or sustainably holding that. So how or where or what do you find hope in to continue as, just generally speaking, or as an activist?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to hang on to hope. I think you have to be realistic with your goals. I mean, I'm well aware that this film and this play is not going to be the solution to the end of the Rohingya genocide. But I know that it can have other real tangible impacts. So I think it's just important to latch onto that, to know that you can play a part in bringing this crisis to a close and to an end, to a peaceful end. But I think if you go in with the expectation that I'm going to solve this crisis with this thing, you're inevitably going to be disappointed, because it's as black and white as the Rohingya crisis seems, it's still a very complex issue, and there's so many different moving parts that are sometimes above you. But for me specifically with this project, what gave me hope, again, always comes back to the kids and the community. I mean, they hold on to so much hope. None of them have given up and said, well, there's nothing we can do. The Burmese government is bigger than us, stronger than us. We might as well just, let it happen. And so they were very resilient and very committed to seeing a change happen. And so if their spirits were strong, then I had to match that. I had to come in with that same spirit. But it's hard sometimes. It's hard. Some days you think that, there's nothing you can really do. It's hard to hang on to hope. My hope sometimes wearies with fluctuates with the Rohingya people. Sometimes I think that we're getting closer to justice, but then the next day all of that changes. So I think it's important just to stay focused on what you can do, as small as it may be, because that sort of keeps you going. And when you take on the burdens of the world on your shoulders, that's when I think you'll be disappointed. And it's quicker and easier to lose hope like that, because you're not seeing anything happen if you think you're going to solve this crisis.
Yeah.
But if you're saying, I just want to focus on spreading awareness in my community, and that's something that can easily be done, and that sort of propels you to go further and get bigger with your goals. So I think it's important to be realistic.
Yeah, and important to have that community mindset, I guess. The intro music, I guess, to this podcast is a spoken word called Wake Up by Nasim Asgari. And one of the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, but she's talking about when did justice go from just us to just them and God. And so, we need to have it that it is so that it's justice for all of us. And that our justice is all intersectional, and it affects and impacts us in so many different ways and has ripple effects. And so holding on to the hope perhaps that we need to do this for each other and by each other, and making sure that our goals are realistic in whatever projects we do. And again, going back to not being distracted by too many.
And it's hard when you're concerned with international crises, because those things are sometimes a little bit harder to really latch onto in terms of tangible impact. So that's why it's important, really, and we learn this in global studies, is focus on your own community. I mean, we have so many injustices in Canada in terms of the Indigenous communities here, in terms of even Muslims. There's so much Islamophobia in Canada. The government is currently trying to implement more regulations in terms of Islamophobia, and human rights. And so there's so much already happening in Canada that we should, as citizens of Canada or citizens of whatever country you're in, there's always injustices that are happening that you can do a lot more to impact, because you're there and you're close to the impact. So sometimes it's more important to start in your own backyard than abroad. Yeah.
And that grassroots activism, I think, provides also a medium of hope, I guess, because when you see those impacts being made locally, perhaps it will sustain you in terms of the global crises as well, or whatever your goals are. It doesn't have to be humanitarian necessarily, but whatever it is. And so my final question is, at the end of each podcast, I invite everyone to pray for, a group or a person, an issue, etc., just so that, we can maintain that as well. And so is there anyone, any group, any issue you'd like us to all send a Surah Fatiha out for, or keep in our thoughts and prayers and actions as well?
Yeah, I think definitely now more than ever, I think we all need to be keeping the Rohingya people in our du'as. It's been an incredibly difficult time, not just for me, but for the Rohingya community here in Canada. They're getting a lot of phone calls of family members being killed. And obviously, I'm sure everyone listening is seeing in the news, either intentionally or unintentionally, of what's happening in Burma. And so I hope we can all grasp our hands together and hold it up and ask Allah to protect and shelter the Rohingya people with His mercy, and to bring them justice and bring the perpetrators of this genocide to justice. To the Burmese government needs to be held to account in this life and in the next for their unrelentless slaughter of these innocent people. So I just ask that Allah protect the Rohingya community, guide them, and guide our ummah to be able to be strong enough to not let this one pass us by. It's so easy to be interested and be attentive to this issue now, but it's easy to also lose interest and lose attention when something else comes back. So I ask Allah to keep our attention on the Rohingya people until this crisis is resolved, and I ask Him to bring this crisis to a close as soon as possible, and grant the Rohingya people safety and security where they stand. And I ask Allah to unite our ummah so that we're not divided by little things and small petty issues, that we can be united on this front, because the Rohingya people are our brothers and sisters, and they need us now more than ever. So may Allah guide us on this journey and smile upon our ummah.
Allahi Ameen. Yeah, that was really beautiful. And inshallah, we work towards that. And your play and the play of the Rohingya youth and their stories are so important, and hopefully those can be a guiding form of prayer for us, because prayer is not just, calling out to God, but it's a prayer where we have to change our souls, change our mentalities, our actions, our thoughts, the way we communicate with each other. And I think this play and your work in general is one form in which we can do that, and a guide for it. So,
that's what's being a Muslim. It's inna ladina amanu wa aminu salihat. It's believe in Allah and do good deeds. It's twofold. So we can't just make prayer. We also have to act. And so I hope that our ummah embodies that.
Yeah, and to the end of that is also to have sabr.
Yes.
To that as well. And so we do need to have patience and faith in His mercy, His rahmah, His justice, and in ourselves as well. I think that we can carry on His, carry out the 99 names of Allah. Not perfectly, but we do our best to do so. So I think, so thank you so much, Yusuf. It's been a really amazing and honest and a conversation full of wisdom. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I talk a lot, so I'm sorry if...
Oh, I love it. It made it so easy.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And this was a really great discussion.
Amazing. So can you give me a moment, Yusuf?
Yeah.
So there you have it, folks. That was the interview with Yusuf Zine. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you're inspired by it. And I hope that we can figure out what systems, what activism and supports are going on within our communities that would be of service for the Rohingya communities that have resettled in whichever country you're at, or the ones that are currently still in Myanmar. And that would be it. I would actually like to add some names to the dua list, and I hope you can give your duas and actions to the Rohingya community and keep these following people in your prayers. Murtaza Walji, who was gone from this world too soon, if you could keep him in your duas, that would be great. And also there's been a 14-year-old boy who was stabbed and beaten outside of a mosque in Birmingham. The mosque is the Idara Marifa Islam Mosque, where members were commemorating the death of the Holy Prophet's grandson. At the time of this recording, he is in critical condition, but can we please put our duas there that inshallah he survives and is on the road of healing and recovery. And whilst on the note of commemorating the death of the Holy Prophet, maybe you could keep in your thoughts and prayers the Prophet's grandson and his companions who lost their lives fighting against oppression and for justice. I mean, this happened in the year 680 AD, but the fight, the story, the fight for justice still inspires millions around the world to stand up against oppression and to do so with dignity. So if we could all keep these folks in our prayers, that would be great. And that's it for me. So if you like this podcast, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review, which the reviews just help me understand, what folks are looking for from this podcast, and it helps potential subscribers to subscribe. So if they see good reviews and ratings, they may be more willing to subscribe or at least listen to the podcast. And share it with family and friends. Many of you have already done so, and it means a lot to me, and it would continue to mean a lot to me if you shared it with more folks. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @TheRogueMuslim, or on Facebook, facebook.com/TheRogueMuslim. And again, massive thanks to Nasim Asgari for the spoken word at the beginning of the podcast, and her links will be listed in the show notes as well. So that is it from me, and until next time, keep creating and telling your stories. Khalafis.